No one likes Western games anymore, especially Western Game of the Year award shows. And that's what we're seeing with the Game of the Year nominees that are coming out for this year, where a lot of Japanese and Chinese games are there. And very few Westernized games are getting that nomination. I think this is reflective of what we've been seeing throughout the industry for the past 10 years, where there has been a destruction of Westernized games in favor of a lot of Eastern games that are staying true to the values of gamers. And those values are absolutely making beautiful designs with amazing gameplay, and on the side maybe a good story or two. And I think that's what we're seeing with a lot of the games that are being nominated nowadays, where we're getting a focus of actual fun games that are being nominated rather than the overall hokey pokey games that are more focused on political activism rather than making a great game that is appealing to the gamer and player base. And I think that's what we saw with the most recent 2024 nominations for Game of the Year. You know me, I don't care about the Game of the Year nominations or anything like that. I'm kind of old school and never pay attention to that, so whatever they say is Game of the Year doesn't really matter to me. But I think this is just reflective of a sea change of what we're seeing throughout the industry, where people are trying to maintain their credibility, much in kind of what we're seeing with politics nowadays, where we're seeing people trying to align themselves with the winning faction right now when they realize ratings are crashing and people don't believe them anymore. And I think that's what we're seeing with the Game of the Year nominations today, where they're showing a lot of East Asian games are winning out over Western gaming developers that have higher ratings, higher scores, and overall higher likability from the review base in the Western world. Of course, I'm talking about Dragon Age Veilguard, that has been highly rated by every single mainstream journalist since its release, even though very few people are actually playing the game, and it has been lambasted by the player base, customer base, and overall Dragon Age fans that hate this game. And you can see that with the Metacritic score reflecting what the player base actually thinks about this game, regardless of what the reviewers are saying. And this is just showing the loss of influence that a lot of video game journalists have on the gamer base now, where they're not buying the games they're saying are the best games of the year because they know they're not the best games of the year, and they're sticking to what other people that they actually trust do think about these games. And that's what we're seeing with Dragon Age Veilguard, which was snubbed practically throughout the Game of the Year nominations. I think this is reflective of a gaming industry nomination cycle where they're trying to protect their credibility with the player base, because we know the games that are terrible, that are being sponsored by these video game developers, to be put up on a pedestal, so much so that every game reviewer is going to the contrary of what the gamers are actually playing. I think Dragon Age Veilguard is the best example of that, where people play the game and they know it's terrible, but the game reviewers are trying to lie to your face and tell you the game is actually great. And I think this is showing throughout the nomination cycle, where we're seeing mostly the games that people actually think are great. And the biggest surprise has to be Black Myth Wukong, because Black Myth Wukong was a game that was totally attacked by the video gaming journalists for being so great and not in line with what the values that a lot of video game journalists want to see out of the game. It didn't have the DEI principles, it didn't have the political activism, it didn't have the diversity, it didn't try to placate to westernized politics. It did the opposite of what every investment banker and UN global non-governmental organization wants you to do with the game. And I think that's why it succeeded. It made a game for the player base, it made a game for its own culture, and ignored all the cultural critics that were attacking the game for months. And this was kind of a surprise. People thought it would be ignored, but this is a show that the Game of the Year awards are trying to protect their credibility. It's not going to win anything, but it shows that, okay, we recognize this is a good game, so please trust us. And I would tell the gamers, don't trust them. Never trust these people. I'm not going to watch the Game of the Year. I'm just talking about it because it's showing that even they can't hide the poor quality of westernized games that are actually being produced in the world today, where most westernized games are terrible. Even the game that they put up here, I'm like, is it really that good? A card game? Maybe it is good. Maybe it's a fanatical fan in the audience that will tell me how great Balatro is. It doesn't look that great to me. All the other games actually stand on their own, except for Final Fantasy VII. For me, I just don't care for that remake and whatever it's doing, but I understand people that love the game. Metaphor Fantasio is an amazing game. Of course, people have controversy over the DLC of Elden Ring Shadow of Erdtree. I can understand that. It should have its own category because it's just taking up a spot that would go to another Japanese game. It's not going to go to a westernized game, that spot. So it kind of really shows that they're struggling to find content that is on par with the quality that will show and represent that the Game of the Year awards actually has credibility with the gamers. So I think them putting Shadow of Erdtree in there. It's just them showing that, okay, we want all the best quality content. We want people to know that we are a standard bearer within the industry. And for me, I'm not believing all that noise. Next year, they'll do the same thing they did the previous years. They'll ignore Hogwarts Legacy, all these other big games and titles that came out for political activist reasoning. So I never trust these organizations. You shouldn't trust them. But this is interesting to see that Japanese and Chinese games are dominating the Game of the Year awards. And it just shows the giant shift that we're seeing from Western games to Eastern games. And it's kind of sad to see that, because Western games used to dominate the market. We used to have the big titles that were kind of changing the gaming industry. Now that has been left over to the Asian games, and more awkwardly with Korea and China, which are newcomers into this industry. And it's funny and fascinating to see that happening, but it's a natural shift as Western developers forsake the quality games that they produced in the past and are trying to cultivate this modern audience that doesn't buy games, and leads to multiple bankruptcies of many developers. And I think this is the political divide that we're seeing in the gaming industry today, and we see that reflected back in the Game Awards when you compare it to its previous years, where it's highly politicized, and this year where it is trying to showcase high quality games. And I think that is the thing that we can't trust in gaming anymore. People that shift and change with the winds of the political cycle. And I think that's what we're seeing with the Game Awards. They know the political winds are changing, and they're changing their tune on what games are going to be represented in their Game of the Year award show. And I just don't trust that. I don't like that. I think that is snaky and unreal and kind of lowbrow, and hopefully most gamers feel the same way that I do. I know people always talk about the Game of the Year awards. I get irked and annoyed when I see it trending. I'm like, people still believe in this? Who cares about this? It does not represent the gamers, and it does nothing to the gaming industry as a whole. Who cares about a little award show and what it represents to that corporation or body that has control over it? That corporation that influenced Jeff Keighley, all those people are there for their influence. And I hate their influence on the culture of gaming and on culture in general, where they're trying to be the Oscars. And we know what happened to the Oscars. The Oscars now represent trash content. I watch some of these best movies that have won Oscars, and I'm falling asleep while they're playing. And I think that's the situation we're seeing with the gaming industry in these Game of the Year award shows. But I think this is just a desperate claw back for relevancy for the Game of the Year awards. And I'm thinking it won't work. Hopefully it won't work. Hopefully the audience out there doesn't trust them. I don't trust them, and hopefully in the future most gamers don't trust them. But so far, I like how it shows that Western gaming is dying, and there's little they can do about it but show us the facts. But you leave a comment, tell me what you think about the situation. Like, comment, share, subscribe. This is Wagner Knows Why. Catch you next time.